She was only meant to survive her first night in Seoul. Instead, she found a man bleeding in an alley, expensive suit, shaking hands, and 3 armed men closing in. Nia Davis had no money, no backup, no reason to stop, but she did. She dragged the stranger into a rusted cargo container and held him there while bullets tore through metal. When the shooting stopped, she disappeared. She never gave her name. He never asked. What Nia didn't know that night was this. The man she saved was Choi Tae-min, one of the most dangerous figures in South Korea, and saving him didn't end the story. It started something neither of them could control. 6 years later, Nia comes back, not for thanks, not for protection, but because something from that first night followed her across borders, and now people are dying for it. Choi has power, money, an empire built on fear, but none of it helps if the secret is in her head. And the question isn't whether he can trust her, it's whether letting her leave the first time was his biggest mistake. And if you're already hooked, drop an heart emoji to signify that you're loving it so as to encourage me to keep updating these stories. Now let's continue. The rain hammered Seoul's Gangnam district like bullets, each drop exploding against concrete in a rhythm that matched Nia Davis's racing heart. 23 years old, fresh off a 12-hour flight from Atlanta, every possession she owned crammed into 2 battered suitcases, she'd landed in South Korea with $300 and a desperate need for distance from everything she'd left behind. The teaching position at the language academy had fallen through. "We found someone more qualified," the email had said, arriving 2 hours after she'd cleared customs. No job, no backup plan, no return ticket she could afford. Her dark skin glistened under the neon lights as she trudged through the downpour, her curvy frame wrapped in a thin jacket that did nothing against the cold. The GPS on her dying phone had led her down increasingly narrow streets, away from the glittering towers and into the kind of neighborhood where even the street lights seemed reluctant to shine. That's when she heard it. Gunshots. Not the movie kind, the real kind that crack the air and make your bones vibrate. 3 sharp reports that echoed off buildings and died in the rain. Nia froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to find the main road, to pretend she'd heard nothing. But another sound followed, a groan, low and desperate, coming from the alley to her left. This isn't your problem, she thought. You don't even speak Korean. But her feet moved anyway, drawn by something she couldn't name. Maybe it was the memory of every time she'd needed help and been ignored. Maybe it was the reckless desperation of having nothing left to lose. The alley was narrow, stinking of garbage and something metallic that made her stomach turn. A man lay crumpled against the wall, expensive suit soaked through, one hand pressed against his side where blood seeped between his fingers. His face was sharp, beautiful in that way that seemed carved rather than born, with features that spoke of wealth and power even as life leaked out of him. 3 men stood over him, guns drawn, speaking rapid Korean. Nia didn't understand the words, but she understood the intent. Execution. The wounded man's eyes found hers, dark, calculating, even in death's shadow. He didn't plead, didn't beg, just watched her with an intensity that made her feel like she could see straight through to her core. "Walk away," reason demanded. "This is how you die in a foreign country." But Nia Davis had been walking away her entire life, from her mother's disappointment, from her ex-boyfriend's control, from every dream that had withered under the weight of other people's expectations. And look where it had gotten her, broke and alone on the other side of the world. Maybe it was time to stop running. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a metal pipe, rusted and heavy, and brought it down on the closest gunman's head with every ounce of frustrated rage she'd been carrying across the Pacific. The man dropped. His companion spun, shocked to find a curvy black woman standing in the rain like an avenging angel armed with trash. The moment of surprise was all she needed. "Run!" she screamed at the wounded man, knowing he probably didn't understand English, but hoping tone transcended language. He understood. Despite the bullet in his side, Choi Tae-min moved with a fighter's instinct, rolling behind a dumpster as his would-be killers redirected their attention to this unexpected variable. Bullets sparked off metal. Nia dove, her body hitting pavement hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The wounded man's hand found hers, warm, slick with blood, surprisingly steady. He pulled her behind the dumpster, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered something in Korean. His other hand produced a gun from somewhere inside his jacket. Everything became noise and chaos. He fired twice, methodically, and 2 more bodies hit the ground. The third attacker fled into the night, footsteps splashing through puddles and fading into the urban maze. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Nia's entire body shook, adrenaline making her teeth chatter. She'd never seen death before, not like this, up close, irreversible. The men on the ground weren't moving. Blood mixed with rainwater, creating pink rivers that flowed toward the storm drains. The man beside her was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he said, in heavily accented but clear English, "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Nia managed, her voice shaking. "You're bleeding badly. I've noticed." He tried to stand, made it halfway before his legs gave out. Nia caught him, her arms straining under his weight. He was taller than he'd looked lying down, all lean muscle under that expensive suit. "Hospital?" she asked. "No." The word was absolute. "They'll finish what they started." "Then where?" He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in her drenched hair, her worn clothes, the fierce determination in her brown eyes that had made her pick up that pipe instead of walking away. Something shifted in his expression. "There's a cargo yard 2 blocks east, container 447. Can you get me there?" "I don't even know where I am." "Follow the main road. Turn left at the electronics shop with the blue sign. The yard is behind it." Nia had no reason to trust him. Every instinct she'd developed surviving Atlanta's rougher neighborhoods screamed that this was a mistake. But she'd already committed to the insanity. Might as well see it through. Getting a bleeding man through Seoul's backstreets turned out to be easier than expected. The rain provided cover, and the late hour meant few witnesses. The cargo yard was exactly where he'd said, a maze of shipping containers that loomed like metal giants in the darkness. Container 447 was unlocked. Inside, it had been converted into something between a safe house and a bunker. Cot, medical supplies, bottled water, and weapons. Lots of weapons. "Who are you?" Nia asked as she helped him onto the cot. "Someone who makes enemies." He peeled off his jacket, revealing a wound that looked worse under the harsh LED lantern light. "The bullet went through. That's good." "That's good?" Nia stared at the hole in his side. "You need a doctor. I need you to clean and bandage it. The supplies are in the cabinet." He gestured to a metal locker. "There's morphine in the top shelf. Take it." "I'm not—" "You saved my life. That makes you a target now, too. The man who ran will report back. They'll look for you." The weight of what she'd done crashed over her. Nia sank onto a crate, her hands still shaking. "I just got here. I don't even have a place to stay. I was just trying to find the hostel, and then I heard—" Her voice broke. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those intense dark eyes. Then, "What's your name?" Nia Davis." "Nia Davis," he repeated, like he was memorizing it. "I'm Choi Tae-min, and I'm going to make you an offer. I don't— Stay here tonight. Help me with this wound. In the morning, I'll give you $50,000 and a plane ticket anywhere you want to go. Or," he paused, wincing as he shifted position, "or you stay in Seoul. I'll give you an apartment, a job, protection, but you'll forget this night ever happened. Forget you saw me. Forget those men. Forget everything." Nia's mind reeled. $50,000. That was more money she'd seen in her entire life. Enough to go home, to start over properly, to... Why? She asked. Why would you do that? Because you picked up a pipe and attacked armed men to save a stranger. That kind of courage is rare. And because if those men find out about you, they'll kill you to tie up loose ends. I don't leave debts unpaid, and I certainly don't let innocent people die for my mistakes. What if I go to the police? He smiled, and it was a terrible, beautiful thing. The police won't help you, but I will. That's the only choice that matters right now. Nia looked at her hands, still trembling, still stained with his blood. She thought about the email that had destroyed her plans, about the empty bank account, about the life she'd left behind that hadn't wanted her anyway. She thought about the way her ex had made her feel small, how her curves had been something to mock rather than celebrate, how every door had seemed closed until she'd literally fled the country. And she thought about the moment she'd picked up that pipe, the moment she'd stopped running. "Tell me how to clean the wound," she said. Choi Tae-min's smile changed then, became almost genuine. "The supplies are in the cabinet. Start with the antiseptic. This is going to hurt." He didn't scream when she poured antiseptic into the bullet wound, but his jaw clenched hard enough that she could hear teeth grinding. She worked as carefully as her shaking hands allowed, following his calm instructions, bandaging the entry and exit wounds with supplies that were definitely military grade. "You've done this before," she observed. "Different side of the gun, usually. Should that make me feel better?" "No." He met her eyes. "Nothing about this situation should make you feel better. But you're alive, and so am I. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for." When she finished, Choi Tae-min lay back on the cot, his face pale but his breathing steady. "There's a bag in the corner with clothes, clean ones, and food in the cooler. Help yourself." Nia did, changing out of her soaked clothes behind a privacy screen that seemed absurdly thoughtful for a secret bunker. The clothes were men's, too large but warm and dry. She found instant noodles and bottled water, her first meal in this strange country consumed while sitting on a crate 3 feet from a man who'd killed 2 people in front of her. "The morning?" she asked. "You'll really let me leave?" "I keep my promises, Nia Davis." His eyes were already closing, exhaustion and blood loss dragging him under. "But think carefully about what you choose. Some nights change everything." He was asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and even despite the wound. Nia sat in the darkness, listening to the rain hammer the container's metal roof, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. She could take the money and run. $50,000 would solve every problem she had. She could go home, face her mother's disappointment with a nest egg, start fresh somewhere new. But something about this night felt like a doorway, like she'd stumbled through into a different story than the one she'd been living. For the first time in years, she'd acted instead of reacted. She'd been powerful instead of powerless. And Choi Tae-min, whoever he really was, had looked at her not as something to use or control, but as someone who'd saved his life, as someone valuable. Nia pulled out the envelope she'd grabbed from the alley in the chaos. It had been lying near Choi Tae-min, and she'd snatched it instinctively when helping him run. She opened it now, finding papers covered in Korean characters she couldn't read, and a USB drive tucked into an inner pocket. She had no idea what any of it meant, but something told her it was important. When dawn broke through the container's narrow windows, Nia had made her decision. She tucked the envelope into her bag, careful not to wake Choi Tae-min, and slipped out into the Seoul morning. Not because she was running away, but because she needed to think on her own terms, without his intensity and his offers clouding her judgment. She had his envelope. If he was looking for her, that would get his attention. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the envelope contained evidence that would put a target on her back for the next 6 years, and that Choi Tae-min, the man she'd saved, would spend those same 6 years searching for the woman who'd vanished with the only proof of his brother's betrayal. Nia Davis stepped off the plane at Incheon International Airport with the kind of confidence that comes from surviving things that should have killed you. 6 years changes a person. Nia's curves were still there, if anything, more pronounced after she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space, but now they were wrapped in custom clothing that cost more than her entire wardrobe had 6 years ago. Her hair was cut in a sharp style that framed her face like a weapon. Her eyes held the kind of knowledge that comes from spending years in the shadows, learning things most people never wanted to know. She'd used those 6 years well. After leaving Seoul that morning, she drifted through Southeast Asia, taking whatever work she could find, teaching English in Bangkok, bartending in Manila, coding websites in Vietnam. But always, in her spare time, she'd been studying Korean first, until she could read and speak it fluently, then computer security, then patterns of organized crime in Asia, because she'd opened that envelope. And once you see certain things, you can't unsee them. The USB drive had contained financial records, proof of money laundering operations that connected Choi Tae-min's organization to a rival syndicate. But more than that, it contained evidence that someone inside his organization was selling him out. The attack that night hadn't been random. It had been an assassination attempt orchestrated by someone he trusted. Nia had spent 3 years teaching herself to decode the encrypted files, using library computers and internet cafes, slowly piecing together a picture of the Seoul underworld that was far more complex than she'd imagined. And then, 2 years ago, she'd gotten recruited. The Zeng group had found her in a Hanoi internet cafe, impressed by her ability to crack encryption systems they'd thought were unbreakable. They'd offered her a job as an information analyst, tracking criminal organizations across Asia. The pay was excellent, the work was dangerous but intellectually challenging, and it gave her access to information about Choi Tae-min's organization, about the war that had erupted in Seoul's underworld after his near assassination, about the bodies that had piled up as he'd hunted for the traitor in his ranks, about how he'd executed every person he thought might have betrayed him, except he'd never found the real culprit, because the real proof was sitting in Nia's apartment in Hong Kong, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. Seoul had changed in 6 years, grown more vertical, more crowded, more alive, but the bones of it were the same. Nia navigated the subway system with ease, her Korean fluent enough to pass for someone who'd lived here for years. She checked into a hotel in Gangnam, not far from where it had all started, and spent the afternoon confirming what her sources had told her. Choi Tae-min was still alive, still running one of the most powerful organizations in Seoul, still looking for the person who'd tried to kill him 6 years ago, and still looking for the woman who'd saved his life and vanished. Nia stood in front of her hotel mirror, studying her reflection. She'd become someone different in 6 years. The scared girl who'd picked up a pipe in the rain was gone, replaced by a woman who'd learned to navigate worlds most people didn't know existed. But she remembered that night, remembered his blood on her hands, his intense gaze, his promise to protect her if she stayed. She'd chosen to leave. Now she was choosing to come back. The question was whether Choi Tae-min would see her return as a gift or a threat. She contacted him the way she'd learned to contact dangerous men, through intermediaries, coded messages, careful protocols. She didn't use her real name. Instead, she sent a single message through channels she knew would reach him. Container 447 remembers. The response came within an hour. A time, a place, and a warning. Come alone. The place was a restaurant in Gangnam, the kind that looked ordinary but served as a front for something darker. Nia arrived at exactly 9 p.m., wearing black jeans and a leather jacket that hid the knife she'd learned to carry in Asia's dangerous places. Not that a knife would do much good if Choi Tae-min decided she was an enemy. The restaurant was empty except for 2 men at the back table. She recognized Choi Tae-min immediately, though 6 years had changed him too. The boyish sharpness had hardened into something more dangerous. Scars marked his hands that hadn't been there before. His suit probably cost more than a car, and he wore it like armor. But his eyes were the same. Dark, calculating, missing nothing. He stood when she entered, a gesture of respect that surprised her. The man beside him, younger, with the build of someone who'd grown up fighting, kept his hand near his jacket in a way that suggested a gun. 6 years, Choi Tae-min said in English, his accent less pronounced than she remembered. 6 years I've been looking for the woman who saved my life. I wasn't hiding, Nia replied in Korean, watching his eyebrows rise slightly. I was learning. Learning what? Who tried to kill you that night? And who's still trying? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The younger man's hand moved closer to his gun, but Choi Tae-min held up one hand, stopping him. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Talk. Nia sat, maintaining eye contact, projecting confidence she'd earned through hard experience. She pulled out a tablet, opened an encrypted file, and slid it across the table. That envelope I took from the alley that night. It contained more than you realized. Financial records showing money being siphoned from your operations. But more importantly, communication logs. Encrypted. But I had 6 years to work on them. Choi Tae-min's fingers moved across the tablet with practiced ease, his expression unchanging as he read. But Nia had learned to read people in her years away, and she saw the minute tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible clench of his jaw. This is impossible, he said finally. These accounts don't exist in any of our systems. They do now, buried in subsidiary operations you acquired 3 years ago. The trail was covered well, but I found it. Why bring this to me? You could have sold this information to my enemies, could have used it yourself. Why come back? It was a good question. Nia had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times during the flight from Hong Kong. Because you made me a promise that night, she said simply. You said you'd protect me if I stayed. I left before you could keep that promise, but I kept something of yours, and that means I owe you a debt. I don't like owing debts. You could have sent this anonymously. I could have, but there's more to this than just financial records. The person who tried to kill you that night, they're still in your organization, still working, and they're planning something bigger. The younger man spoke for the first time in rapid Korean. This could be a trap. It could be, Nia agreed in the same language, turning to look at him directly. But if I wanted him dead, I wouldn't have saved him 6 years ago, and I certainly wouldn't have spent the last 3 years tracking his enemies while working for a security firm in Hong Kong. Choi Tae-min's laugh was unexpected, sharp and genuine. You've changed. The woman in the alley was terrified. The woman in the alley was 23 and broke. I'm 29 now, and I've learned how the world actually works. Show me. Nia pulled up another file. The pattern I found suggests the betrayal goes deeper than one person. It's a network. Someone inside your organization coordinating with the Sangmun gang. The money being siphoned is funding operations against you. Small things at first. Territory disputes, supplier problems, but it's escalating. How do you know about the Sangmun gang? I've been working in intelligence for 2 years. It's my job to know. Choi Tae-min studied her for a long moment, and Nia forced herself to remain still under that intense gaze. Finally, he said, I have questions. I expected you would. That night, you vanished. I sent people looking for you. Why disappear? Because $50,000 and a plane ticket anywhere sounded good to a broke kid, but also because I wasn't ready for what staying would mean. I needed to become someone who could survive in your world before I came back. You took the envelope. I did. I didn't know what it contained until I opened it. By then, I was already gone. You could have returned it. I could have. But I wanted to understand what I'd stumbled into, and the more I learned, the more I realized you were in danger. The kind you couldn't see because it was coming from inside. And you spent 6 years preparing to tell me this. I spent 6 years becoming someone you'd believe instead of someone you'd dismiss. Which character do you relate to most right now? Nia's calculated courage or Choi Tai-min's cautious power? Drop your thoughts below and hit that subscribe button for love and tension, because this story is about to get dangerous. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken calculations. Finally, Choi Tai-min nodded to the younger man. "Dalton, leave us." Dalton, an unusual name for someone in Seoul, but Nia filed it away as the man stood and exited through the back, leaving them alone in the restaurant. "You want something," Choi Tai-min said once they were alone. "This isn't just about repaying debts." "No," Nia admitted. "It's not. What do you want?" "I want to find the person who betrayed you. I want to finish what I started that night when I pulled you out of that alley. And," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I want to stop running. I've spent 6 years learning, growing, becoming dangerous, but I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. You think working with me will make you safer? I think the people who tried to kill you that night know I exist. The man who escaped? He saw my face, and if he's still alive, he's told people. Coming back to Seoul puts a target on my back regardless. At least this way, I'm aiming back." Choi Tae-min's smile was sharp as a knife. "You've definitely changed. The woman I met 6 years ago wouldn't have put it that way. The woman you met 6 years ago wouldn't have survived 6 years in the intelligence world. Show me what you've found. Everything." They spent the next 3 hours going through the files Nia had compiled. She'd tracked money flows, communication patterns, operational disruptions. She'd identified 5 possible suspects within Choi Tae-ming's organization, people with both motive and opportunity to betray him. But there was one name that appeared more often than the others, buried in layers of misdirection. A financial officer who'd been with the organization for 12 years, trusted implicitly, with access to systems that should have been impossible to exploit. "Young Hwan-sik," Choi Tae-min said, his voice flat. "Impossible. He's been with me since the beginning." "Which makes him perfect," Nia replied. "Think about it. Who else would you trust with your financial operations? Who else could hide money moving in and out without raising flags? The betrayal that cuts deepest comes from those closest to you. If you're wrong, I'm not. Look at the timestamps on the communications. They align perfectly with Young's travel schedule. Look at the accounts. They're structured exactly like the legitimate ones he manages, just buried deeper. This is someone who knows your systems intimately." Choi Tae-min's fingers drummed on the table, a nervous gesture that seemed out of place on someone so controlled. "If you're right, this changes everything. Yang knows everything. Operations, safe houses, contacts. If he's been feeding information to the Sangmun gang, then they know everything you're planning, which means you can't move against them until you deal with him first." "How?" Nia pulled up one more file. "I have a plan, but you're not going to like it." The plan was simple in concept, deadly in execution. Young Hwan-sik had been feeding information to the Sangmun gang for 6 years, ever since the night of Choi Tae-min's near assassination. What Nia had discovered through months of painstaking analysis was that Young wasn't just betraying his boss for money, he was positioning himself to take over once Choi was eliminated. The Sangmun gang was just a tool, a temporary alliance that would be discarded once Young had consolidated power. "It's ambitious," Choi Tae-min had said when Nia explained her findings. "I'll give him that." Now, 3 days after Nia's return to Seoul, they were putting her plan into action, and "not going to like it" had been an understatement. They sat in Choi Tae-min's private office, a place designed to intimidate, all dark wood and carefully displayed symbols of power. Dalton stood by the door, his expression skeptical. 2 other trusted lieutenants, Haruki and Valentina occupied the other chairs, both studying Nia with the kind of assessment that came from years of survival in dangerous places. "Let me make sure I understand," Valentina said, her Russian accent thick, despite years in Seoul. "You want us to fake Boss's death, make Yang think his plan worked, and see who he contacts?" "Essentially, yes," Nia confirmed. She stood at the head of the table with a tablet, projecting data onto the wall screen. "Yang is careful. He's been careful for 6 years, which is why no one caught him. But if he thinks Choi Tae-min is actually dead, he'll have to move fast to consolidate power. That means contacting his allies, moving assets, showing his hand." "It's risky," Haruki said quietly. He was Japanese, smaller than the others, but with a presence that suggested he was more dangerous than he looked. "If word gets out that Boss is dead, every enemy we have will move against us, which is why the death has to be convincing but contained. We stage an attack, something public enough that Yang believes it, but controlled enough that we manage the information flow. Choi takes a bullet, goes down, gets rushed to a hospital where only Yang and the inner circle know which one. We make it look like he's critical, maybe dying. Yang will think it's his moment. And when he makes contact with the Sangman gang," asked Choi Tae-min, "we'll be listening. I've already identified 3 communication methods he uses, 2 encrypted messaging apps and a dead drop location in Itaewon. We monitor all of them. The second he reaches out, we have proof." Dalton spoke up from his position by the door. "And if he doesn't take the bait, if he's smart enough to wait, then we've lost nothing except a few days. But he won't wait. He can't. 6 years he's been working towards this. The moment Choi appears vulnerable, he'll move. It's human nature." Valentina leaned back in her chair, studying Nia with new respect. "You've thought this through." "I've had 6 years to think about what happened that night. This is the only way to draw him out without tipping him off that we know." Choi Tae-min looked at his people. Dalton's skepticism, Valentina's calculating approval, Haruki's quiet consideration. Then his eyes met Nia's, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared risk, of trust being built on unstable ground. "We do it tomorrow night," he decided. "Valentina, arrange the medical team. I want doctors we control at the hospital. Staff who'll play along. Haruki, prepare the security protocols for the safe house where I'll actually be staying. Dalton, you're with me during the staged attack. I need someone who can sell the panic." "And me?" Nia asked. "You're the tech expert. You monitor Yeung's communications. The moment he contacts anyone, I want to know." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Nia set up surveillance on Yeung's digital communications, backdoor access to his encrypted apps. That was delicate work requiring patience she'd developed over years of similar operations. She'd learned her trade from the best intelligence operatives in Asia, and she put every skill to use now. The physical staging was Valentina's domain. She procured blood packs, organized the response team, arranged for the hospital cooperation. Watching her work, Nia understood why Choi Tae-min trusted her. Valentina moved through the logistics of faking an assassination attempt like someone organizing a dinner party, efficient and unbothered by the macabre nature of the task. "You've done this before," Nia observed as they worked side by side in the tech room Choi Tae-min had provided. "In Vladivostok, I faked my own death twice," Valentina replied, without looking up from the medical supplies she was cataloging. "Once to escape the Brodva, once to get close to them again. It's all about commitment to the performance. Do you think this will work? I think you're smart, and your analysis is thorough, but intelligence only takes you so far. At some point, you have to trust your gut." Valentina finally looked up, her pale eyes sharp. "What does your gut tell you about Yeung?" Nia thought about the pattern she'd tracked across 6 years, the careful way Yeung had built his betrayal. that he's been patient for a long time, but patience becomes hunger eventually. When he sees his chance, he'll take it. Good answer, Valentina smiled, and it was the first genuine warmth Nia had seen from her. Boss trusts you. That's rare. Don't make him regret it. Does he trust easily? He used to. Before that night 6 years ago, before the betrayal he still hasn't fully uncovered, he trusted his people completely. Now, Valentina shrugged. Now he trusts data and demonstrated loyalty. You saved his life once, but you also disappeared for 6 years with evidence that could have destroyed him. He's watching to see which version of you is real. It was honest, in a way Nia hadn't expected. And you? What do you think? I think you came back when you didn't have to. I think you're smart enough to be dangerous and brave enough to be useful. That combination is either going to save us all or get us killed. Valentina's smile sharpened. Let's hope it's the former. The staged attack happened at a restaurant in Gangnam, neutral territory where Choi might reasonably be having a business dinner. Nia watched from a van 2 blocks away, monitoring the surveillance feeds as Choi and Dalton entered the establishment right on schedule. Yeung was there too, having been invited to discuss financial matters. Nia watched his face on the camera feed, looking for any sign that he suspected something. But he seemed relaxed, comfortable, smiling as he greeted his boss. Either he was an excellent actor, or he genuinely had no idea what was coming. The attack came 20 minutes into dinner. 4 men burst through the restaurant's front entrance, guns drawn, shouting in Korean. Chaos erupted. Diners screaming, scrambling for cover. Choi Tae-min stood, reaching for his own weapon, and the first shot caught him in the shoulder. Even knowing it was staged, even having helped plan every detail, Nia's breath caught as she watched him fall. The blood pack exploded convincingly, Choi's expensive suit blooming red. Dalton returned fire, and 2 of the attackers went down, actors who'd been promised generous payment for their performance. The other 2 fled, exactly as scripted. Dalton was screaming into his phone, calling for help, cradling Choi's dying body. And Yeung? Yeung was standing 5 feet away, and his face showed perfect shock, perfect horror, perfect concern. But Nia had trained herself to look deeper, and for just a moment, less than a second, she saw something else flicker across Yeung's expression. Not concern, satisfaction. Gotcha, she thought. The ambulance arrived within 3 minutes. Paramedics, all on Choi's payroll, loaded him onto a gurney with professional urgency. Young tried to follow, but Dalton blocked him. "No one but family," Dalton said, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "Boss's orders. If he dies..." He didn't finish the sentence, just shook his head. Young nodded, stepping back, but Nia watched his eyes. He was calculating, already planning. She could almost see the wheels turning behind that carefully maintained mask of loyalty. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. Dalton stayed behind to coordinate with the arriving police. Real police this time, but ones who understood that certain investigations into organized crime were better left incomplete. Young stood in the chaos, his phone already in his hand. "He's making a call," Nia spoke into her comms, alerting the team. "Haruki, are you picking it up?" "Got it." Haruki's voice came back through her earpiece. Regular phone call to his assistant, telling her to clear his schedule. Boss is injured. Sounds appropriately concerned. Stay on him. He'll make the real call when he's alone. For 3 hours, they watched Young's digital footprint. He went to his apartment, made appropriate calls to other organization members, expressing concern and asking for updates on Choi's condition. He did everything a loyal lieutenant should do. But at 2:17 a.m., alone in his apartment with the lights off, Young pulled out a second phone, one that didn't exist in any official records. "There," Nia breathed, watching the encrypted app activate on her monitoring screen. "He's using the secure line." The message was brief, coded, but Nia had spent months learning Young's patterns. She decoded it in real time. CT down. Hospital unknown. Moving to phase 3. The response came within minutes. Confirmed. Proceed. And with those 2 words, Yang Huan-sik condemned himself. We have him, Nia said into the comms, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her system. Evidence recorded. He's coordinating with the Songmoon gang. Copy that, Valentina's voice replied, bringing boss out of hiding. Prepare for phase 2. Phase 2 was simpler than phase 1. Confront Yang with the evidence and let him explain his way out of 6 years of betrayal. They did it in Choi Tae-min's private office, the same room where they'd planned the operation. Yang was summoned under the pretense of an emergency meeting about security following the attack. He arrived looking tired but composed, carrying a tablet with financial reports. He walked into the office and stopped dead. Choi Tae-min sat behind his desk, very much alive, bandages visible under his shirt, but otherwise unharmed. Dalton and Valentina flanked the door. Haruki stood in the corner, his presence somehow more threatening for its quietness. And Nia sat in the chair next to Choi's desk, her laptop open, displaying 6 years of Yang's treachery in irrefutable detail. "Hello, Yang," Choi Tae-min said calmly. "I believe we need to talk." The color drained from Yang's face. His eyes darted to each person in the room, calculating escape routes, survival strategies, finding none. "Boss, don't." The single word cut through any defense Yang might have mounted. "We have everything. Communication logs, financial transfers, your second phone, your contact with the Songmoon gang, the attack 6 years ago that you helped coordinate. All of it." Yang's composure cracked, his shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked nothing more than a tired, middle-aged man who'd gambled everything and lost. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. 3 days, thanks to Nia." Choi Tae-min gestured to her. "You remember her? The woman from 6 years ago? The one who saved my life that night." Yang's eyes widened with recognition and fear. "You're the person who took the envelope," Nia finished. "The evidence you were supposed to destroy before anyone saw it. I've had 6 years to work through the encryption, Yang. 6 years to learn exactly how deep your betrayal goes." "Why?" Choi Tae-min asked, and his voice held genuine hurt beneath the anger. "You've been with me since the beginning. I trusted you with everything. Why betray that?" Yang laughed, a bitter sound. "Because the beginning was a lie. You inherited this organization from your father. I built it with my mind, my planning, my financial genius. But who gets the credit? Who gets called boss? Not the Korean accountant, always the pretty face with the family name." "So it was ambition," Valentina said from the door. "How pedestrian." "Don't mock what you don't understand," Yang snapped. "I spent 12 years watching lesser men get promoted over me because they were better fighters or more ruthless. My brain built this empire, but muscles get the rewards." "Your brain also destroyed it," Nia interjected. "The Songmoon gang isn't your ally. They were using you to weaken Choi's organization before absorbing it entirely. You would never have ruled anything. You'd just be the first one they killed once Choi was gone." Yang's face went pale. "No, we had an agreement. I provide information, they support my takeover." "They lied to you," Haruki said quietly from his corner. "Just like you lied to boss. Traitors don't trust each other, Yang. You should have known that." The weight of his mistake crashed down visibly. Yang aged 10 years in 10 seconds, understanding flooding his features. He'd spent 6 years building a plan that had been doomed from the start, betraying the one person who genuinely valued his contributions for allies who saw him as disposable. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Choi Tae-min stood, walking around the desk to stand in front of his former friend. Now I have to decide if 12 years of loyalty before the betrayal counts for anything. if the brother I chose means more than the traitor he became. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Choi Tae-min said, "You're going to help us destroy the Songmun gang's operations. Every contact, every safe house, every operation you told them about, you're going to undo it all. And then you're going to disappear. New identity, new country, never to return. That's the mercy I'm offering for the 12 years before you betrayed me. And if I refuse, then Dalton demonstrates why he's my head of security, and we dump your body in the Han River. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice, and everyone in the room knew it. Yang nodded slowly, defeat written in every line of his body. "I'll cooperate," he said. "Good." Choi Tae-min returned to his desk. "Valentina will supervise. You have 72 hours to give us everything. After that, you're gone." They led Yang away, Valentina's hand firm on his arm. The door closed, leaving Choi Tae-min, Nia, and Haruki alone in the office. "You were right," Choi said, looking at Nia. "About all of it. The betrayal, the method, even the timing. How did you know he'd take the bait? Because betrayers are paranoid. He spent 6 years waiting for his moment. The second he thought it arrived, his fear of missing it overrode his caution. You've learned a lot in your time away. I had good teachers." Nia closed her laptop, suddenly exhausted. "What will you do about the Songmun gang? With Yang's information, destroy them completely. It'll take time, but they've been operating under the assumption that we don't know they exist. That advantage dies with Yang's cooperation." Haruki spoke from his corner, his voice thoughtful. "The woman from 6 years ago wouldn't have planned this operation." "No," Nia agreed. "She wouldn't have. But I'm not her anymore." "Who are you now?" Choi Tae-min asked. It was a good question. Nia thought about the terrified girl in the rain, about the years of running and learning, about the choice to come back when she could have stayed safely away. "Someone who finishes what she starts," she said finally. The next 72 hours blurred together in a frenzy of intelligence gathering and operational planning. Yang, true to his word, provided everything: safe house locations, communication protocols, financial accounts, names of corrupt officials on the Songmun gang's payroll. The information was staggering in its scope and damning in its detail. But something nagged at Nia as she processed the data. Something in the pattern didn't quite align. She was alone in the tech room at 3 a.m., reviewing communication logs for the 5th time, when she found it. Or, rather, found what wasn't there. "That's impossible," she muttered, pulling up another file. Choi Tae-min's voice from the doorway made her jump. "What's impossible?" She hadn't heard him enter. He was dressed casually, unusual for him, in dark jeans and a black sweater, holding 2 cups of coffee. He offered her one, and she accepted gratefully. "The timeline doesn't work," she said, gesturing to her screen. "Yang provided us with communication records going back 6 years, but there's a gap, 2 months right after your attempted assassination. No contact with the Songmun gang, no encrypted messages, nothing." "He was being careful," Choi suggested, settling into the chair next to her. "No, Yang's careful all the time, but he's also consistent. Every other period shows regular contact, even if it's just check-ins. But this 2-month gap? Complete silence." Nia pulled up another window. "And that's when the Songmun gang was most active against your operations. Why would Yang go dark when his allies needed him most?" Choi Tae-min leaned forward, his expression sharpening. "Unless he wasn't the one feeding them information during that period." "Exactly. Someone else was." Nia's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up financial records. "Look at this. During those 2 months, there were 6 operations against your organization. Each one hit targets that only a handful of people knew about. But Yang didn't have access to 3 of those targets. Who did? Nia cross-referenced the data, her heart sinking as the answer emerged. Dalton. The name hung in the air like poison. Impossible, Choi said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dalton's been with me for 8 years. He saved my life more times than I can count. I know, which makes him perfect. Nia pulled up more files, her hands shaking slightly. I almost missed it because I was so focused on Young. But look, these financial transfers during that 2-month gap, they don't match Young's pattern. Different accounts, different routing, different timing. Someone else was coordinating with the Songmun gang while Young was laying low. You're saying Dalton and Young were working together? No. Nia shook her head, the pieces finally clicking into place. I'm saying they were working against each other, both betraying you, both with different plans, neither knowing about the other. Young wanted to take over your organization, but Dalton? She pulled up the final piece of evidence. Dalton was hired by the Songmun gang 8 years ago to get close to you. He's not your lieutenant who turned traitor. He was never yours to begin with. The coffee cup in Choi Tae-min's hand cracked, the porcelain unable to withstand the sudden pressure of his grip. Coffee spread across his desk, but he didn't seem to notice. 8 years, he said quietly. 8 years of trusting him with my life. I'm sorry, Nia said, meaning it. I should have seen it sooner. How could you? I didn't see it, and I've worked beside him every day. Choi Tae-min stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The Seoul skyline glittered in the darkness, oblivious to the revelation occurring in this small room. He saved my life, multiple times, real situations, real bullets. Why would he do that if he was trying to get me killed? Because you're worth more alive than dead, Nia replied, pulling up more data. Look at the operations he saved you from. Each one drove you deeper into conflict with rival organizations. Each one made you more isolated, more dependent on your inner circle. He wasn't protecting you. He was shaping you into exactly the kind of leader the Songmun gang could eventually destroy. And that night 6 years ago? The one time Dalton wasn't with you. The one time you went somewhere without your security chief. Why? Nia met his eyes. Because he helped set up the ambush. He arranged for you to be alone at that location. The attack was supposed to succeed. What he didn't count on was a random black woman with a pipe interfering. Understanding and rage warred across Choi Tae-min's features. So when I survived, he had to pivot, become the loyal lieutenant, the protector, all while continuing to work against me. Exactly. And when Young started his own betrayal, Dalton probably saw an opportunity. Let Young take the fall, remain trusted, continue his mission. We need to... Choi stopped, his eyes widening. Where's Dalton right now? Nia checked the security feeds. He's supposed to be supervising Young with Valentina. They ran. The holding room where they'd secured Young was 3 floors down. Nia kept pace with Choi Tae-min, despite his longer legs, both of them racing against a possibility too horrible to fully articulate. The door to the holding room stood open. Nia's gun was in her hand. When had she drawn it as they entered? Valentina lay on the floor, unconscious but breathing, a nasty bruise forming on her temple. Young slumped in his chair, throat cut, blood still pooling beneath him. And Dalton? Gone. Call Haruki, Choi Tae-min snapped, kneeling beside Valentina. Medical team, now, and lock down the building. But even as he gave orders, Nia knew it was too late. Dalton had a head start, and 8 years of embedded knowledge gave him advantages they couldn't immediately counter. He knew every safe house, every protocol, every contingency plan. Valentina came around as the medical team arrived, her eyes unfocused but furious. He hit me from behind. Coward. I never even saw. She spotted Young's body and cursed in Russian. He got what he wanted. Did Young talk before he died? Everything. Dalton asked specific questions about the Song Mun gang's operations. I thought, Valentina's expression twisted with self-recrimination. I thought he was gathering intelligence for Boss. Instead, he was warning them. How long ago? 20 minutes, maybe less. 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, Dalton could have reached any number of safe locations, could have warned the Song Mun gang that their infiltration had been discovered, could have disappeared into Seoul's underbelly with 8 years of intelligence to sell. But the response says, target remains unchanged, payment upon completion. Choi, I think the assassination attempt 6 years ago was a paid hit. Someone specific wanted you dead, and they contracted this network to make it happen. Choi's expression darkened. The network was hired by someone else? That's what it looks like. And whoever hired them, they're still paying. This isn't just about territory or business. Someone has a personal vendetta against you, and they've been funding attempts on your life for at least 6 years, maybe longer. Any idea who? Nia had spent the past week working on exactly that question. She pulled up another file, this one showing financial trails that went back years before the assassination attempt. The money comes through so many shells and offshore accounts that tracing it fully would take months, but I found a pattern. The original payment was made from a Hong Kong account, and look at the timing. She showed him a transaction log. This payment was made 3 days before your father died. The silence that fell was heavy with implication. My father's death was ruled natural causes, Choi said carefully. Heart attack. I know, I checked the records, but what if it wasn't? What if someone wanted him dead and then immediately went after you to eliminate the succession? What if this has never been about territory or business, but about destroying your entire family? Choi stopped, processing. That's a level of planning that goes beyond normal criminal rivalry. Exactly, which means whoever is behind this, they're not just a crime boss. They're something else. Someone with resources, patience, and a specific reason to want your family eliminated. Nia pulled out the last piece of her research, the one that had kept her up for the past 3 nights. I found something else in your father's old files, the one stored in your secure archive. 3 months before he died, he was investigating a breach in his organization. Someone had stolen a significant amount of money, and your father was close to identifying them. Then he died, and the investigation ended. You think whoever stole the money killed my father, and then tried to kill you to cover their tracks completely? Nia met his eyes. Choi, I think the person who hired this network to kill you is someone who knew your father well, someone who had access to the organization's inner workings, someone who's been operating in the shadows for years, building power while eliminating anyone who might expose them. Do you have a name? Not yet, but I have a lead. She showed him a final document, a property record from Hong Kong. This building is owned by one of the shell companies that paid for your assassination. I cross-referenced it with your father's records, and 3 months before his death, your father had a meeting there. With who? The record just says HK Contact, but whoever it was, they were important enough that your father met them personally. Choi stared at the address, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. My father had many contacts in Hong Kong. Business partners, rivals, family friends. It could be anyone, which is why we need to go there. Singapore is important, but Hong Kong is where this started. If we want to really end this, to stop looking over our shoulders for the next assassin, we need to find out who hired the network and why. That's a hunt that could take months, years even. I know, Nia said quietly, but it's necessary. The network is a symptom. Whoever hired them is the disease. We can spend our lives fighting symptoms, or we can cure the disease. Choi walked to the window, looking out over the Seoul skyline he'd fought so hard to control. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. 6 years ago, you saved my life in an alley. You could have walked away then. You could have walked away any time since. Why keep fighting this fight? Nia joined him at the window. Because that night in the alley, I stopped running from things. I started running toward them. And because She paused, finding the right words. Because you looked at me like I mattered. Not my curves, not my color, not any of the things people usually define me by. Just me, someone who'd chosen courage over safety. I'd spent my whole life being invisible or being reduced to stereotypes. In that alley, covered in blood and rain, I was finally just Nia, someone who'd saved a life. That's worth fighting for. So this is about proving yourself? No, it's about being myself, the self I discovered that night. Nia smiled slightly. The network, the conspiracy, the danger, that's all real and important, but what keeps me here is simpler. I can do it again. But you? He looked at his former security chief. You only get to betray someone once. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. One of the gang members drew his weapon, either panic or stupidity guiding his hand. Haruki's bullet caught him before his gun had fully cleared the holster. The warehouse erupted. Nia dove behind a support column as gunfire sparked off metal. She'd trained for this, practiced in ranges and controlled environments, but the reality of combat was different, louder, more chaotic, filled with the smell of cordite and fear. She returned fire with controlled bursts, watching gang members fall. Valentina moved like a dancer, all grace and economy of motion, each shot precise. Raven and Tomas had flanked from the east, creating crossfire that left the Sangmoon gang with nowhere to hide. Within 90 seconds, it was over. 5 gang members down, disarmed or surrendered. But Dalton had used the chaos to run. Haruki, secure these prisoners, Choi Tae-min ordered, already moving toward the exit Dalton had taken. Valentina, get that laptop. Nia, with me. They chased Dalton through the warehouse's guts, footsteps echoing off concrete and metal. He had a head start, but was navigating unfamiliar terrain while injured. One of Tomas's shots had clipped his leg, leaving a blood trail they could follow. Nia's heart hammered as they ran, her body moving on instinct and training. This was it, the culmination of 6 years of preparation, of becoming someone who could operate in this world. The scared girl who'd picked up a pipe in the rain couldn't have done this, but the woman she'd become could. They found Dalton on the roof, cornered at the edge with nowhere left to run. The Seoul skyline spread behind him, glittering with indifference to the drama playing out on this forgotten building. 8 years, Dalton said again, breathing hard, his leg bleeding steadily. I spent 8 years earning your trust, building a brotherhood. You know what the worst part is? I actually started to respect you. Started to wonder if maybe I'd chosen the wrong side. But you didn't switch sides, Nia observed, her gun steady on his center mass. Respect isn't the same as loyalty. No, Dalton agreed. Loyalty is what got me here. Loyalty to the people who recruited me when I was nothing, who gave me purpose and training and a mission. I'm loyal, boss, just not to you. Choi Tae-min's gun never wavered. Last words? Yeah, Dalton's smile was bitter. That night 6 years ago, I set you up perfectly. Every detail planned, every exit blocked. You should have died in that alley. But she, he gestured to Nia, she threw a pipe and changed everything. One random woman and 8 years of work fell apart. Funny how the world works. Hilarious, Choi said flatly. Nia, step back. But before anyone could move, Dalton's hand went to his jacket. Choi fired twice, center mass, professional and final. Dalton fell backward off the roof's edge, disappearing into the darkness below. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sound of impact. Check him, Choi ordered. I want confirmation. Nia and Choi descended back through the warehouse, emerging into the alley where Dalton's body lay crumpled on the concrete. Dead, definitively. No last-minute reprieve, no dramatic survival. Just the messy finality of betrayal's price. His jacket, Nia said, kneeling carefully. He was reaching for something. She pulled out what Dalton had been going for. Not a weapon, but a phone. The screen showed a message half-typed. Compromised. Extraction failed. They know. He was warning someone. Even dying, he was trying to complete his mission. Nia scrolled through the phone's recent messages, her expression darkening with each revelation. This goes beyond the Sangmoon gang. Dalton was reporting to someone else, someone higher up in a network that spans multiple countries. How high up? International. Look at these routing protocols. This isn't gang-level organization. This is intelligence service tradecraft. Nia's hands were shaking slightly as the implications hit her. Choi, the Sangmoon gang wasn't using Dalton. They were both being used by something bigger. Back in the warehouse, they secured Dalton's laptop and interrogated the surviving gang members. What emerged was a picture more complex than either Young's ambition or Dalton's betrayal had suggested. The Sangmoon gang had been receiving support from a larger criminal network, one that stretched from Seoul to Hong Kong to Singapore. Dalton had been their operative, inserted years ago with the long-term goal of destabilizing Choi's organization from within. Young's betrayal was independent but convenient, creating additional chaos that served the larger network's purposes. "Why target you specifically?" Valentina asked as they reviewed the intelligence in Choi's office hours later. But Nia had spent 6 years learning to think like people who operated in shadows, and she'd spent the last week studying every piece of information about Choi Tae-min's organization, including details Dalton couldn't know she'd discovered. "The warehouse in Seongdong-gu," she said suddenly. "The one listed as abandoned in your records but still drawing power according to the utility records I pulled. That's where he'll go." Choi Tae-min's eyes sharpened. "How do you know?" "Because it's not in any of your official systems. Dalton thinks it's a blind spot, a place you don't know about. But I found it when I was tracking your financial anomalies. Small amounts of money redirected to maintain it, payments buried in legitimate expenses." Nia pulled out her tablet, showing him the location. "It's a perfect extraction point, close to the highway, near the river, multiple exit routes. If Dalton's meeting the Sangmoon gang anywhere, it's there. Then that's where we go." What would you do in Nia's position? Trust your instincts or play it safe? Comment below and show some love to Love and Tension by hitting that subscribe button. This story isn't over yet. They assembled a team in under 15 minutes. Haruki, 2 trusted operatives named Raven and Tomas, and Valentina, despite the medical team's protests. Nia found herself armed with more firepower than she'd ever carried, checking and rechecking her weapons with practiced efficiency that came from years of training she'd never expected to use. "You don't have to come," Choi Tae-min said as they loaded into the vehicles. "This is dangerous, and you've already done more than—" "I came back to finish this," Nia interrupted. "That night 6 years ago, I pulled you out of an ambush I didn't understand. Dalton was the architect of that ambush. Now I'm going to help pull him out of whatever hole he's hiding in. This is my fight, too." The warehouse sat in Seoul's industrial district, a hulking concrete structure surrounded by identical buildings that had seen better decades. Lights burned in the upper windows, subtle but visible if you knew to look. Nia had been right. They approached in 2 teams. Choi Tae-min, Haruki, and Raven took the north entrance. Nia went with Valentina and Tomas through the south, moving through shadows with the kind of coordinated silence that spoke to extensive training. The warehouse interior was a maze of rusted machinery and forgotten storage, but voices echoed from the upper level, English and Korean mixing together. Nia gestured to Valentina, who nodded and moved forward to get a visual. They found Dalton on the 2nd floor, surrounded by 5 members of the Sangmoon gang. He was in the middle of handing over a laptop, intelligence no doubt, containing everything he'd learned in 8 years embedded in Choi Tae-min's organization. "Complete operational structure," Dalton was saying in English. "Safe houses, financial accounts, weapon caches, everything you need to dismantle what's left of his operation." "And Choi Tae-min?" one of the gang members asked in Korean. will be dead within the week once you have this information. He trusts almost no one now. Isolated leaders make easy targets. You've done well, another gang member said. The money has been transferred. Your new identity papers are ready. You'll be in Thailand by tomorrow night. Dalton smiled. 8 years of playing loyal dog, worth every second to see his empire fall. That's when Choi Tae-min stepped out of the shadows, gun raised, his entire team materializing around the perimeter like ghosts. 8 years, Choi said, his voice carrying the kind of cold fury that made everyone in the room freeze. 8 years of brotherhood, of trust, of me believing you'd die for me when you were just waiting for the right moment to sell me out. Dalton's face went through several emotions: shock, fear, calculation, before settling on resigned defiance. Boss, I should have known you'd figure it out eventually. You should have known better than to underestimate the woman who saved my life 6 years ago. Nia found what you and Young both tried so hard to hide. Dalton's eyes found Nia standing beside Valentina with her gun steady. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe, or regret. The woman from the alley. I always wondered if you'd show up again. 8 years of planning undone by a random act of kindness. Not random, necessary, just like this is necessary. The Songmoon gang members were calculating their odds, hands moving toward weapons. Choi Tae-min's team had them outnumbered and outpositioned, but desperation makes people stupid. You can't win this, one of the gang members said to Choi. We have your entire operation mapped. Kill us and 20 more will come for you. Then I'll kill them too, Choi replied simply. I've built this organization 3 times over the past 8 years. Every time Dalton undermined it. Dawn was breaking over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Because my organization has been interfering with their operations without realizing it, Choi replied, studying the network diagram Nia had constructed. Territory I control, shipping routes I've locked down, contacts I've cultivated, all of it disrupts their supply chains and financial flows. They've been trying to eliminate me for years. Dalton was just their most successful attempt. Until Nia, Haruki observed quietly from his corner. Everyone looked at her. Nia, who'd saved Choi's life with a pipe in an alley, who'd spent 6 years becoming someone who could decode the conspiracy, who'd returned when she could have stayed safe in Hong Kong. Until me, Nia agreed. But this isn't over. This network, it's still operating. We stopped Dalton and neutralized the Sangmoon gang, but the larger organization is still intact. So what do we do? Valentina asked. Nia pulled up a file on her laptop, the one she'd been compiling for the past 6 years, the one that went far beyond just Young's betrayal. We go after them, all of them, every node in the network, every operation they're running. We don't just defend, we attack. Choi Tae-min studied her, and Nia saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. You've been planning this for a long time. 6 years, Nia confirmed. I told you I spent that time learning. This is what I learned, that the attempt on your life was part of something much larger, that stopping one traitor wouldn't be enough, that to really finish what I started that night, I'd need to dismantle the entire organization that wanted you dead. That's not just dangerous, Haruki said. That's suicidal. Networks like this don't fall easily. I know. That's why I came back. Nia looked at each of them in turn. I can't do it alone, but together, we have the intelligence, the resources, and the motivation. We can hurt them in ways they won't see coming. You're talking about war, Valentina observed. I'm talking about survival, Nia corrected, because they're not going to stop. Dalton failed, but they'll send others. Eventually, one of them will succeed unless we strike first. The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what Nia was proposing. Not just revenge, not just defense, but an active campaign against an organization that had operated in the shadows for years. Finally, Choi Tae-min spoke. "Tell us your plan." 3 weeks later, Nia stood in Choi Tae-min's private office, spreading documents across his desk with a kind of confidence that had become second nature. They'd spent those weeks systematically dismantling the Sang-moon gang's operations, using intelligence from Dalton's laptop and the captured gang members to strike at safe houses, financial operations, and supply routes. The larger network had gone quiet, pulling back to assess the damage, but Nia knew it was temporary. Predators didn't abandon hunting grounds, they just changed tactics. "We hurt them," Choi said, reviewing the latest reports. 12 operations disrupted, millions in assets seized, but they're adapting. "Of course they are," Nia replied. "Organizations like this survive because they're flexible, but we're learning their patterns." She pulled up a map on her tablet, showing movement of money and resources across East Asia. "Look at this. 3 days ago, they started redirecting funds through Singapore. That means they're planning something there." "How can you tell?" "Because this isn't operational funding. It's setup money. Bribes, equipment purchases, establishing infrastructure. They're moving into new territory or launching a major operation." Haruki, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "If they're focusing on Singapore, that means they're expecting heat here to continue. They're not giving up on Seoul, just diversifying, which gives us an opportunity," Valentina added. "Hit them in Singapore before they're fully established. Cut off the expansion before it starts." "That would require going international," Choi observed, "leaving Seoul, operating in unfamiliar territory against an enemy that knows we're coming." "Yes," Nia said simply. "It's risky, but waiting for them to establish a Singapore operation and then fighting a two-front war is riskier." The discussion continued for another hour, mapping strategies and contingencies, but throughout it, Nia felt the weight of something she'd found in Dalton's final communications, something she hadn't shared yet because she wasn't sure what it meant. When the others had left and only she and Choi remained, she pulled it up on her screen. "There's something else, something in Dalton's messages that doesn't fit the pattern." "Show me." Nia pulled up an encrypted communication, one she'd only managed to partially decode. Dalton received this 2 months ago. Most of it's about standard operational updates, but this section, she highlighted a passage. He references the original contract and asks if it's still active after all this time. "What contract?" "I don't know." "I finally like who I am, and she doesn't run from unfinished business." Choi turned to face her, and Nia saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not romance, they'd both lived too hard for fairy tale endings, but respect, recognition, the kind of partnership that came from surviving impossible things together. "Hong Kong," he decided. "We'll take a small team. Valentina, Haruki, and Raven. We investigate quietly, trace the connections, and find our phantom contractor. And if they're as dangerous as I think, then we deal with them the same way we dealt with Young and Dalton. Carefully, thoroughly, and permanently." His smile was sharp. "You've taught me that some fights require patience, but you've also taught me that patience without action is just waiting to die." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Nia compiled everything she'd learned into a secure database, encrypted 6 ways and backed up across multiple secure servers. If something happened to her, the information would survive. The truth would survive. On her last night in Seoul before leaving for Hong Kong, Nia returned to the alley where it had all started. It looked different now, cleaner somehow. The garbage had been cleared, the graffiti painted over, but the bones of it remained. The narrow walls, the dumpster that had sheltered them, the pavement where blood had mixed with rain. She stood where she'd picked up that pipe, remembering the girl who'd been so afraid and so desperate that courage had become her only option. "Thank you," she whispered to that girl, "for being brave when it mattered." "Talking to yourself?" Choi's voice came from the alley entrance. He'd followed her, she realized. Or maybe he'd known she'd come here. "Saying goodbye to who I was, before Hong Kong changes me again." You think it will? Everything changes us. The question is whether we choose the change or it chooses us. She turned to face him. That night, change chose me. I picked up a pipe because I couldn't walk away. Now I'm choosing to see this through. That's different. Better? Stronger, Nia said. Better is subjective, but stronger I can prove. They stood in the alley where their paths had first crossed. Two people who'd been shaped by violence and betrayal into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. Tomorrow they'd fly to Hong Kong to hunt a ghost who'd been orchestrating murders for years. They'd risk everything chasing answers that might destroy them. But tonight, in this alley, they were just two people who'd survived things that should have killed them. Whatever we find in Hong Kong, Choi said quietly, whatever truth we uncover, it won't be simple. I've learned that truth rarely is, Nia replied, but I'd rather die chasing a complex truth than live with a comfortable lie. No dying, Choi said firmly. I still owe you for saving my life. You've saved mine plenty since I came back. Then we're even, which means everything from here is a choice, not an obligation. Nia considered that. I choose to see this through, not because I owe you, but because 6 years ago, someone tried to kill you for a reason, and reasons like that don't die just because the assassins fail. They fester, they grow, they become worse. So we cut them out at the root. We try, Nia corrected. But Choi, even if we find who hired the network, even if we eliminate them, this won't end cleanly. People like this have contingencies, backup plans, allies who'll seek revenge. This is the beginning of something, not the end. I know, he smiled, and it was almost sad. But at least we'll face it together. That's more than I had 6 years ago when I was bleeding in this alley. They left the alley as dawn broke over Seoul, two silhouettes disappearing into the city's awakening streets. 48 hours later, Hong Kong International Airport. The heat hit them first. Oppressive, humid, nothing like Seoul's crisp air. Nia adjusted her bag and scanned the terminal, professional instincts taking over. Hong Kong was bigger than Seoul, more chaotic, a city where money flowed like water and secrets accumulated in layers. Somewhere in this city was the person who'd tried to have Choi's father killed, who'd orchestrated the assassination attempt 6 years ago, who'd been funding a criminal network's operations for years, and Nia was going to find them. The address from the property records? Tomorrow, Choi decided. Tonight we rest, gather intelligence, confirm our local contacts. We move carefully. Whoever we're hunting has had years to establish themselves here. We won't get a second chance if we tip them off. They checked into a hotel in Central, rooms booked under aliases, paying cash to avoid electronic trails. Nia immediately set up her equipment, laptop, encrypted communications, access to databases she'd cultivated during her intelligence work. Within 2 hours, she had a clearer picture of the property from the records. It's a legitimate office building, she reported to the team gathered in Choi's suite. Corporate floors, high-end law firms, and financial consultants. The shell company owns the entire 15th floor, but according to public records, it's leased to something called Phoenix Consulting. What does Phoenix Consulting do? Haruki asked. On paper, business development and strategic planning. In reality, Nia pulled up more files. I can't find any actual business operations. No clients, no projects, no public presence beyond a basic website. It's a front. For what? That's what we need to find out. Nia showed them building schematics she'd acquired. Security is corporate standard. Key card access, cameras, security desk. But the 15th floor has additional protocols. Biometric scanners, reinforced doors. Whatever Phoenix Consulting really is, they value privacy. Can you get us in? Raven asked. She was the quiet one, all efficiency and lethal competence. Yes, but it'll take time to bypass their systems without triggering alarms. 3 days, maybe 4. "We don't have 4 days," Choi said. "If Dalton's last message reached anyone, the network knows we're actively hunting them. They'll be taking precautions." "Then we go in the old-fashioned way," Valentina suggested. "Walk through the front door during business hours, pretend to have an appointment, get to the 15th floor before anyone realizes we're not supposed to be there." It was risky, but everything about this mission was risky. They spent the rest of the evening preparing, rehearsing cover stories, studying the building's layout until they could navigate it blind. The next morning, dressed in business attire that made them look like any other Hong Kong professionals, they entered the building at 9:47 a.m. Nia and Choi went first, walking with the confident purposefulness of people who belonged. The security desk barely glanced at them as they headed for the elevators. 15th floor. The doors opened onto a corridor that was eerily quiet compared to the bustling lobbies they'd passed through. Expensive art hung on walls, the kind that spoke of serious money, and at the end of the corridor, through glass doors marked Phoenix Consulting, Nia could see someone working at a desk. She memorized every detail in a glance, the face, the build, the way they moved. Then her blood went cold, because she recognized them, not from her intelligence work, not from Dalton's files or Young's confessions, from her childhood in Atlanta, from a life she'd left behind when she fled to Seoul. The person who'd orchestrated Choi's father's death, who'd funded assassination attempts for years, who'd built a criminal network spanning continents, was someone Nia had known long before she'd ever heard of Choi Tae-men. Someone she'd trusted. "Nia?" Choi noticed her sudden stillness. "What's wrong?" She couldn't answer, because the implications were still hitting her, rewriting everything she thought she understood about that night 6 years ago. It hadn't been random. She hadn't stumbled into that alley by coincidence. She'd been sent. The person at the desk looked up, saw them through the glass, and smiled. A smile that promised Nia's carefully reconstructed world was about to shatter again.